Theodore Roosevelt said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." These past few weeks, there has been a complete lack of joy in my life. And to be honest, I could not figure out why. Yes, I was overwhelmed with school. And yes, I was overwhelmed with a lot of things that had nothing to do with school. And yes, Ava was sick and I wasn't 100%. But any one of these things didn't seem like it was the end of the world. Even a combination of these things didn't seem like it was that huge of a deal. But I couldn't understand why I was having such bad anxiety and getting upset over things that weren't that big of a deal. So what was it? What had such a strong hold on my emotional health? Comparison. I realized I had started comparing my life to everyone else's around me. Whether it was the amount of schoolwork I thought everyone else had compared to mine, or that it seemed like everyone else didn't have the financial problems that I was struggling with, or even like really silly things like, gosh, it seems like this person has so much free time to their day. Like, where's my free time? Comparisons were rushing through my mind daily, and it had led me to a point where there were multiple days in a row where I just wanted to give up. I was literally just sitting there thinking, is quitting school an option for me? It wasn't. It's not. It's not what God has called me to do, but at that moment I had seemed completely lost. And whatever I was battling, it felt like I was defeated. Comparison was the thief of my joy. Comparison is dangerous. It's like playing with fire. Think about a time where you may have just made like one passing comment or thought about comparing yourself to one another, and it just led to you feeling worse and worse about yourself. Or maybe you had the opposite effect where you compared yourself to others and just felt overconfident. Comparison is way too common. We see it everywhere. If you're a children's pastor, you'll see it in little kids playing and seeing what other kids are playing with, and they always want what the other kids want. As youth pastors, we see it in our preteens and teenagers and how they're constantly comparing their image and their wealth, their athletic abilities, so many things to one another. And it doesn't stop here. Comparison is something that people of all ages struggle with. Even us, as people following Christ's call for our lives, working in ministry, we compare our grades, what phone we have, our circumstances, our cars, and even our faith to one another. We even compare the ministries that we're involved in. At times we may think, maybe if we had this specific event, or had more money, or had a bigger church, or any of these things, then maybe our kids would be coming more, or our youth would be coming more, or adults would be coming more. Then more people would be coming to know God. It may seem like other churches are flourishing more or faster than ours, but that does not defeat us. That does not mean that God's work is not being done in our lives and in our ministry. Our hearts and our minds are continually being distorted with how we wish things would be, instead of concentrating on how God is strengthening us in our own situations to fulfill the call that He has for us. There's this quote that says, "The reason we struggle with insecurities is because we compare our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel." Think about Facebook. We need to stop looking at Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and comparing the highlight reel, the really good stuff that everyone seems to be talking about or posting about or tweeting about, and comparing it to our own reality, comparing it to our hard times and our hardships. We should be looking to God in these times. Just the other day I was going through Facebook and I was seeing comments of these two guys from back home, and they were comparing rims and cars, and oh, I wish I had these rims, oh, I wish I had this car, I can't wait till I have more money so I can get that. And there was another conversation of a girl telling another one how pretty she was and how she wished she was that pretty. And there's youth that come up to me and say, it's really hard to go on Facebook and see all of my friends posting pictures with their boyfriends because it feels me leaving unworthy of having that. And it doesn't stop there. Technology in this day has taken comparisons to a completely new level. It has turned our hearts and our minds away from God instead of toward God. In Psalm 73, we see the author write about how he knew that God was good to his people, was good to Israel, to God's people. But he had become envious of the people that prospered around him that were not followers of God and did not have a pure heart. He was stuck comparing himself and his struggles to those who are able to thrive without God. In verse 3, he writes, "For I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." As he continues, the psalmist realizes that he couldn't quite grasp why this was. He couldn't understand it until he gave that moment to God. He writes, "When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply until I entered the sanctuary of God. Then I understood the final destiny." The psalmist knew that the wicked would perish, but the righteous were able to enjoy God's presence and protection forever. Now, I know that at times we may not be envious of non-believers, but he was struggling with a heart of comparison, just like us. Just like he needed to be focusing on God, we need to be as well. If we give these moments to comparison to God, he will protect us, he will strengthen our hearts, and he will be our portion, so that we will be filled and complete in him, not needing anything else on this earth besides him. The psalm finishes up like this, 73 verses 21 through 26. "When my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and ignorant. I was a brute beast before you. Yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." Like the author at the beginning of Psalm 73, sometimes my heart is just not in the right places. I hold resentment towards people. I get envious that the father of my child gets to go and be free and do whatever he wants without the sacrifices that I daily have to make. Now, I love my daughter more than anything, and anyone who knows that knows how much I love my daughter, and I wouldn't change the sacrifices I make for her for anything. But that it still creeps into my mind. I feel embittered, like the psalmist, for the reason that I had to grow up too fast. I compare myself to others, assuming that they have some easier life because they don't have to juggle as many things as I do. I fill my mind with curiosity on why am I struggling with finances and school and being a mom and not having a support system, and wonder why it seems like others are just able to breeze by. Why would God call me to do something that seems so difficult for me, but maybe easier for someone else? The fact is that there is no focus on God in this thinking. It is all comparisons that just steal my joy. If my mind and my heart were in the right place, I would realize that the earth has nothing for me to desire but God. God is my strength and my portion. God is your strength and your portion. When I began thinking like this, I stopped myself from the negativity why put myself through that? And more importantly, why am I not thankful for the fact that God is by my side through every circumstance, through every hardship, through every day? Why does my heart desire anything else of this world other than God? Now, we may feel weak. We may feel overwhelmed. We may feel completely defeated. But the psalmist offers a fresh perspective on what our hearts and our minds should be focused on. The circumstances we are in now is exactly where God has called us. We are exactly where we're supposed to be. I can't fulfill your calling in the same way that you can't fulfill mine. They may sound similar, but God works through each of us so incredibly differently and uniquely. Comparing our calls to each other's defeats the purpose of having our own call at all. We are no longer taking our calling seriously if we're trying to do someone else's work. It is not our job to fulfill a task that God has called someone else to do. We are not to be concentrating on how God is working wonders in someone else's ministry or life, but we're supposed to be focusing on God's strength for our specific call. Tim Keller, who is an amazing speaker, is much more well known than any of us. But the same Spirit that is working in him, the same Spirit that is strengthening him, is strengthening us and is within us. We have no idea the amount of lives that we'll touch in our ministry through Christ who strengthens us. If God is our portion, there is nothing that can disable us from fulfilling his call in our lives. We have a mighty God. We have a God who is our strength and our portion forever. There is absolutely nothing, no situation that can overpower that in your life. And for that, we should all be forever grateful. I come here being guilty of comparison myself. But I urge myself, all of us, do not let comparison steal your joy. Remember that you are given strength. God is on your side, and he will do amazing things to those who believe. Things may not seem like they're going to work out at times, or in our ministry and in our life. But God has given you a specific call, and that he promises he will not leave you unequipped. God is our strength and our portion forever. How different would our lives look if we didn't compare ourselves and relied on God's strength and his portion instead of our own? Let us not give in to this temptation. Let us not let the enemy have this foothold in our lives. We are called to look to God, rely on his strength, to allow him to be our portion. Let us write this truth on our heart. When my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and ignorant. I was a brute beast before you, yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever.